How did we get to this razor sharp edge with this beautiful secondary thinning bevel and a nice tiny primary cutting bevel from this extremely damaged knife with a massive chip? Hang around and find out. Roman chef knife repair, thinning and sharpening on a 1x30. This knife has got a massive, must be at least 1/4 of an inch chip out of it. It's the size of a fingertip. We are going to grind down the profile so that it matches. Then we're going to give it a little bit of thinning, and then we're going to sharpen it up. We're going to use the Rikon 1x30, a cardboard wheel on a 1/2-speed grinder. Okay, so I've marked this off with a Sharpie, just along the edge, sort of parallel to the profile the way it is originally. This will help me keep the shape of the thing the way it originally was. It'll help me just to ascertain that I haven't taken too much off in one place and not enough in another. So this is a Cubitron 50 grit. I've got the knife at about a 45-degree angle here, like very, very steep. This is now just cutting the knife down to new profile, trying to get as much material off as quickly as possible without doing damage. So it's sort of a medium pressure. Being careful here to take material off behind and in front of the chip, but not to sort of chase the dip further in from the chip. This is a lot of steel, so it's going to take a good couple of passes. I find if you just push really hard and take a whole bunch of steel off straight away, you inevitably end up ruining the profile pretty badly, and then it takes longer to sort of straighten it out again. So nice even strokes and watching that line to make sure we're staying parallel. I did find during the course of this that I was taking off more in the front of the chip than at the back. So I had to go back and just correct that a little bit. You'll see a bit later when I'm checking the profile on a board. The nice thing about using these very low grit Cubitron belts is that they're really good for keeping the heat down. I do still dip the knife in water from time to time. It keeps it cooler. But as long as you are sort of moving the knife continuously, and as long as you're not applying a massive amount of pressure, the temperature does stay down. Hands on the blade, so when you'll feel it warming up pretty quickly if it is warming up. Definitely recommend dipping in water a little more often when you're using the higher grit belts, as they do tend to build heat a lot quicker. You'll notice that I touch the knife a lot softer right near the tip of the blade. That's because the tip is already thinner in the heel because of distal taper, which is the thinning of the blade from the heel side to the tip side. The knife's already thinner in the tip because of that, and you don't want to round it up. You want to keep a nice, even and natural rocking shape to it. So remember to always check your work as you go, just to make sure you're doing what you think you're doing. Here you can see I am trying to go as straight along the platen as possible. This is just to give a little bit more surface area. It helps you to skip over the low points and to touch on the high points. It's kind of like using a wider belt on a wider platen. It's quite difficult sometimes to get the correct shape on a 1x30. I'm using just a flat piece of baseboard to check how the rocking action of the knife is. At this point I notice that the heel is still very high, and because I haven't taken off as much in some places as others, the knife doesn't have a good rocking action yet. It's actually very flat for the last, I'd say, 4 inches of the knife. That means it rocks down towards the back and then it stops with a hard stop. So as I'm taking off material here, checking what I'm doing again, looking where I need to take off more work, there's still a little bit of the divot left from that chip, so trying to work around that, but also trying to cut in a little bit in front there just to get the rocking action a bit better, and a little bit behind to round that to a more natural sort of level position, so that the entire blade gets a little bit of roundness to the back, going to a lot more roundness in the front. This is a typical shape of a German style chef knife. So again, just checking the work as I'm going. Doing this on the 1x30 is a little bit awkward. I would normally do this on my 4-inch grinder, which is pretty good for the final shaping of the profile. It's going okay, but it's a little bit awkward, as you can see. You're not quite sure how to place the knife so that it misses everything other than the belt. But it does work, and it is going okay. Again, just checking and rechecking. You want to take off enough to get it right, but you don't want to take off more than you need to. The heel section is still a little low, but the front also doesn't kind of curve down the way I want it to yet. When you listen to the grinding, you'll probably notice that the heel takes a lot more weight than the rest. It's just trying to get that back down to a good shape. Doing the sort of cutting motion along the belt, I find, helps get it to the correct shape, because you're moving it in the direction you want it to go. So nearly there. Just a little bit more here and there, and it should be good. And you can see still a little bit more on the heel. I actually have a light behind and to the right of me, which casts a shadow on the belt. This helps me sort of line the belt and the knife up on the belt, so that I can get it flat down without rounding up the heel or overdoing the tip. So again, just checking. It's already looking a lot better. The chip is completely removed at this point. So just a little bit more here. And I think we are done. So now just checking the knife, looking at it down the length of the blade towards the light, gives you a good idea of what that shape is and how it looks. So now we're going to cut the primary bevels in. I've got a little paint stick on the side there. It's set at 15 degrees at the moment. I can adjust it to whatever I would like using an angle finder. 15 seems to be good for most knives, and I'm doing 15 on this knife. So set that, carefully line the knife up flat so I don't round up the heel, ruining the profile I've just made. And we cut these bevels in slowly. This will take a few passes. It's okay, I'd rather take my time with it. You can again put a lot of weight on here and be done probably in 2 passes per each side, but then you risk digging the knife into a corner and sort of ruining that profile. So the reason I'm cutting the bevels in before I thin the knife is that it's easier to see that the bevels are equal. So I'll cut them until I've got a burr from each side and then balance them out. Then when I start doing the thinning, I can judge how much I've taken off each side by how much is left of the primary bevel. So because we've taken so much material off this blade, it's like back into material that's a lot thicker, which means there's a lot more material to grind off before we get an apex. So you'll see this will take a couple of passes on each side, or a little bit more than a couple maybe. Again, just take your time, keep checking your work, make sure you're doing it properly, make sure you get the heel of the knife flat onto the platen and that you move it straight away. You don't want to round that heel up. Make sure when you're doing the tip that you stop at the tip and you don't round that up either, because that would render the tip useless. I try and stop just before I get to the actual tip, and that way I normally get the tip. By checking as you're going, you can see what you're doing and you can adjust as you go. If you don't check, you won't have a reference point and you'll just be guessing. I'm still grinding here. I can't remember exactly, but I think at this point I've already got a burr up in some places, but it's not a constant burr all the way through. I'm also trying to do this in such a way that I don't overgrind any section and ruin the profile. I want this knife to rock nicely as well as cut nicely. Nice light strokes here. Also, the harder you push, the larger the bevel is going to be. So they're just checking the work again, making sure it's right. Light strokes, reducing the burr a little bit as we go. Just makes work a bit easier on the next bolt, which will be the 120. Making sure to get that burr even all the way through. Checking the bevels both sides, make sure that they're the same. Now I'm just adjusting the bevel so that it's equal on each side. Feeling for the burr, it's there, and we're good to go. So now we're going to change down to up to a 80 grit, also a Cubitron, still a very fast cutting belt. This will remove enough material to do the initial thinning, but it won't leave massively deep gouges in the knife that you won't be able to get out later. We'll be first just refining this edge, so it'll be pass or two on each side, just getting the tracking right. The belts do run a little bit different one to the other, so refining this edge just a little bit so that we can get the burr off a bit easier on the 120. It is still a massive burr from all the grinding that's been done. Checking as I'm going, making sure I haven't ruined the profile. It's still pretty good. Bringing up that burr, making sure it's a nice even pass, keep those bevels the same on both sides. Second pass. When you've got such a huge burr from a low grit belt and a lot of grinding, it does sometimes take more than a single pass to get that burr reduced just a little bit. It's not ideal to go to a fine belt with a massive burr. Okay, and there we are with that. So now we are going to start the thinning process. So I'm putting the knife down as flat as I can on the platen, both left and right and top to bottom. The spine of the knife is probably 0.5 millimeter off the platen at this point. I'm doing nice light pressure, making sure I'm getting to the heel, making sure I'm getting to the tip. It's very easy to lift the knife up too high and round the tip over at this point. So you really want to watch what you're doing as you're doing it and make sure that you're getting everything you want to get and nothing extra. The pressure I'm using here is fairly light. I'd say light medium. Not a lot of pressure at all. I don't want to dig the corner of the belt in anywhere. It will be impossible to get the divot out if I put one in. So I'm watching the width of the bevel I'm creating. I'm seeing how high up the knife it's going, and I'm also seeing what's happening to the primary bevel. I'm watching it shrink and shrink and shrink on the primary bevel and go higher and higher and higher up the blade. I want to try and get both sides exactly the same. So matching the height of the spine off the platen for the second side, first stroke very light. Have a look, make sure I'm getting it everywhere. Just busy sort of over-analyzing everything. And then going for the second pass. Once you get your initial cut in, it seems to be a little bit easier to do the subsequent passes. Like maintains that angle a bit easier. Again, it's very, very low on the platen, so you really want to be careful not to scratch up the side of the knife any further than necessary to get it nice and thin enough to perform properly. And lifting the handle up there just to get to the tip. Bit of water to cool it again. Just feeling, rubbing your thumb and your forefinger off the edge of the knife. You can kind of feel the thinness of it. You can feel if there's still a step there or if you're actually getting a desirable shape. You also want to check both sides as you go and make sure that you get them as even as possible. Just remember, this is all handwork, so it might never be 100% perfect side to side. You just want to keep it as perfect as you can. Checking, checking, checking. I've noticed on this knife in that area there, the bevel looked to be shorter than the bevel on the rest of the knife. Looking at it further, the flat of the knife had actually been ground thinner at that point, which kind of explains it. It's the same as on a hand-forged Japanese knife. When you thinning it, you'll notice that the shinogi line isn't 100% straight because the thickness of the knife at that point varies from the hammer blows. I'm just checking that I've got the tip properly. I was kind of a little bit behind there, so now I'm going to go through with light pressure and then just hang a little bit more pressure on the tip. Go a little bit slower and make sure I get all the way to the end. This work takes quite a bit of concentration. You really want to take the time with it. You really don't want to get that knife to touch the belt with the flat side, because you'll never get those scratches out unless you regrind the whole blade. So again, just feeling for the thinness of the knife. You'll also find that your one hand will grind different to the other. The dominant hand tends to be a little bit more confident, and you end up putting a bit more pressure on it. So you might find that in order to get the bevels the same on both sides, you might have to do like an extra pass or two with your offhand. So we've done with shaping it. I'm going to go up to a Cubitron 120. I'm going to basically follow the same steps again. We're also going to move off the platen now and into the slack belt. This will kind of convex it just a little bit, but it'll make sure that you take the scratches out at the top of the bevel, so that when you finish the knife on the finer grits, you don't see cut marks going up above the bevel. This gives it a nicer finish. The convexing will be so minute, it might as well be flat. The softer slack belt also helps to just blend any inconsistencies that you might have. Again, just check it as you go. Make sure that you at the correct angle to get both the top and the bottom of that bevel, and that you are getting the entire bevel top to bottom and heel to tip. It's really important to keep checking and to keep analyzing as you go. Light pressure, slower movement, very careful. You can see I'm just struggling to get right up onto the heel there. And we are good. So now we're just going to quickly refine the edge of the knife again on the platen, 15 degrees. Light passes, reduce that burr as much as possible. You don't want to put weight onto this and cut back into thicker material again. You've just gone to all the trouble to get a nice even secondary bevel and to thin the knife down. Check the profile again, make sure I haven't ruined anything, and it's all good. So now we're moving on to a trizact A30, which is in the region of about a 600 grit. And these belts all run a little bit differently, so you might have to adjust your tracking slightly as you go. This time I'm just doing the refining of that bevel first. Again, nice, even strokes. This is going to be like a much lighter pressure. It's just refining, you're not really grinding. Making sure that burr is minimized as much as possible. Make sure you get from the heel to the tip. Make sure you don't round the heel or the tip up. And then onto the slack belt again. Now we're just polishing up where the heavier grits cut that bevel. 600 actually leaves a pretty good finish on there. You could leave it like that. It's quite shiny. Making sure that I get all the scratches out from the heavier belts. I sometimes find it's difficult to get that heel section, both working on belts and stones. Been doing it for a long, long time, but still that heel. That's why it's important to keep checking your work as you go. And once again, just checking there. Checking the secondary bevel for finish. Checking it for height. Making sure both sides are the same and all the scratches are out. That is it for the 600. Now moving on to a grey Scotch-Brite belt. This is the extra fine. This will again blend any inconsistencies there might be. It'll take a little bit of the absolute shine out of that edge. Just blends everything nicely together and gives it a good finish. It looks nice. Heel section again. Nice even strokes. You don't want to hang around too much on the Scotch-Brite belts. They can generate quite a lot of heat. So lightish pressure, moving at a constant speed, trying to match the original angle I ground in there as good as possible. You want to be careful with the Scotch-Brite because it's kind of a spongy finish. So if you push too hard or if you drop your angle just a little bit, you will scratch up the side of the knife. Once again, checking, making sure both sides are the same, making sure both sides are finished. And back into the second side. Nice even consistent speed. Checking. And now, just for fun, I'm going to deburr this a little bit on the Scotch-Brite. It's not a step I normally take. It does reduce the burr quite nicely though. Definitely not removing the burr at this point. It is already fairly small. And happy with that. Okay, so the hard work is done now. Moving everything out the way, bringing up the half-speed grinder. It has a homemade cardboard wheel on it. On the wheel is a bit of green compound. This is now polishing and removing the burr almost entirely. I try and match the angle as close as possible. You take a first stroke, you can sort of see the burr moving up and down. When you turn the knife over, you can see where you've touched, and then you can adjust your angle accordingly. If it's gone too high up the knife, tip it up a bit or move it down the wheel a bit, or vice versa. So just a couple of passes here. You can sort of see that burr you want it to be mostly gone. If you run your fingers up and down the side of that blade, you don't want to feel any of the burr anymore. It must be very smooth already. So cardboard wheel out the way, still sitting here due to injury in the leg. Standing is a far better option. Okay, so onto a felt belt. The felt belt doesn't have any compound to speak of on it. There's just a residue from work that's been done before. So the compound from the cardboard wheel that's left on the knife will transfer to the felt belt. Yeah, I'm just polishing up the secondary bevel again. Get it looking a bit better. You don't want it to be too highly polished. You want it to sort of blend in a little bit better with the rest of the knife blade. And then a couple of passes now as close to the angle as possible. You want to go with light weight here so that you don't round the bevel over. Doesn't take a lot. Just go up and down, and then alternating passes to each side. And that will leave this knife really, really sharp and burr free. Looking now for, well, first feeling it, and then taking a piece of paper, doing a paper cut test, listening for anything rough, checking for any tearing, any stops, little ticks where there might be a chip or something. What I like to do also is then see if the knife will cut through the side of the paper in a couple of places, and it does. It's smooth, it's sharp, and it's bitey. And here I'm just trying to show you the bevels that I've cut in. The lighting isn't great, but there it is. That is a Chromium knife, repaired, thinned and sharpened, ready to go back to work.